What brings us together today, we're here at Augsburg. Thank you very much to Augsburg University for having us. I want to remind people we are going to stay masked today except when eating or drinking. This thing's not over. Thank you for doing that. I want to acknowledge our dear colleague John Nichols. Hosting this event involves 100 little details that are all important, and he's taken care of so many of them so perfectly. Thank you to John Nichols, first of all. Thank you, John. At this time, I'd like to welcome Scott Krajewski, the Associate Vice President for Information Technology here at Augsburg, to formally welcome us today. Thanks.
Good morning. I want to welcome you all to, get the microphone right, welcome you all to the Hagfors Center for Science, Business, and Religion here at Augsburg University. You know, Augsburg's a modern urban university, really rooted in our Lutheran identity. And we serve about 3,500 students as they become informed citizens, thoughtful stewards, critical thinkers, and responsible leaders through our 50 programs and 11 graduate programs. Now with Hagfors, we broke ground in April of 2016. And Hagfors opened for classes in January of 2018. I can still catch the new building smell here or there in some corners. Now at 139,000 square feet. It's Augsburg's largest ever capital campaign. The campaign goal of $50 million was reached a year ahead of plan. And it's the home of 8 departments and half of our faculty. Now the building has 2 wings, with one housing science labs, classrooms and offices, and another wing housing just classrooms and offices. Now today I invite you to really explore the whole building in the time that you're here. And I want to kind of ask you to keep in mind 4 intentional design choices. 1, intersections. Both here as 2 wings physically come together, but also often the wings where the departments have department homes. Now, a department home is a cluster of offices around a gathering space. And faculty and majors can hang out and intersect there and build community. Now, in addition to those department homes, we've placed them near other department homes. So math is across from religion, and business is across from computer science. So a community can be created between disciplines too in this building. And the other interesting thing with the 2 wings is they open up kind of as open arms to our diverse neighborhood. And in the middle of those open arms is a community garden. Kind of under snow right now, but it's there. Now, second is student-centered spaces. There's small group study nooks at the ends of the wings, and there's a really nice large peer tutoring space in the math area. Now, the whiteboard painted walls in the study nooks, yeah, that's a mixed bag. But we do see students hanging out just throughout this building when we're not on spring break. So 3 is art. Now there's numerous donor-funded art pieces throughout the building. And they're all in different mediums. And each piece represents a collaboration between an artist and faculty from disciplines here. And they try to explore an aspect of the discipline in probably an unexpected way. So here's a tip. The often ignored stairwells at the very ends of the wings, those are an art piece. So I invite you to take a walk down those stairwells because you won't be disappointed. Also, the skyway that connects this building to the rest of campus is another art piece. And it's full of words from two different disciplines that are juxtaposed together to kind of make you think. And this atrium has several art pieces as well. When you look up at the glass, you'll see the hymn, "A Mighty Fortress is Our God," adapted from Martin Luther's original handwritten musical score. And then that transitions into the cell structure of an elm tree, which is really cool. And it also serves to prevent birds from crashing into the windows because we don't want that. And then the terrazzo floor that's made of an epoxy resin and crushed stone has representational imagery from the various disciplines that are here. So maybe there's an electrocardiogram you might spot. You might spot some water to represent baptism or ripples from a pebble. And there's another visual that represents a business cycle there. And lastly, the fourth one, classrooms. This building was just a real opportunity for us to push our classroom technology ahead and use touch-aware, short-throw projectors in the classrooms and continue our standards for mobile furniture and simple and clean room controls. Faculty can learn one room, and then they know how to use them all. And then we have this multi-purpose convertible space that can serve as a single room like we are today, or it can be 2 rooms, or it can be 3 rooms, with all the technology in AV to make that happen, which is just amazing. So this room was just such a leap ahead for us in flexibility. Well, I'm so glad to have you all here in person 2 years after we first were going to do this. And so it's just, I really hope you take some time today to really check out this amazing building. We're so proud of it here at Augsburg. And I invite you to top off your coffee, your drinks before your 9:15 keynote and take a wander around the building if you can. Thank you.
So I asked people from higher education in the registration for today's event to answer 2 simple questions. How many classrooms are there on your campus, and how many FTE of staff support those classrooms? I looked up student body size as of fall of 2020, and I could spend a long time talking about this, but I won't. I wanted to just show it and say this data exists. We could go a little deeper in it at an upcoming Zoom call if you're curious, but you have the chance to find your institution and compare it to others in this data set. So this is just a single slide summary of that survey we did as part of registration. So there are 18 schools represented in the data here. Happy to talk about that at a Zoom call coming up if people want to go deeper. Okay, so next slide is exciting because we have a date and a location for the Summit 2023. Eau Claire, University of Wisconsin Eau Claire has agreed to host this event on March 16th and 17th, 2023, coming right up. Mark your calendars, save the dates. Hope we don't have to wear masks. Okay, should we start our panel? I think we should. We have an exciting panel this morning. I'd like to introduce each of the guests, and come on up. Go ahead and make your way up. Shane King is Director of Sales and Marketing at EPA Audio Visual. Griggs Nichols, CTS, is AV Design Engineer from Alpha Video. Nick Pooler, Systems Engineer at Bluum Technologies. And we are joined again by someone who gave our keynote address in 2016 at Winona, Joe Way, Ph.D., Director of Learning Environments at the University of Southern California. And from here on, you are in Joe's excellent hands. Thank you all very much for coming and sharing what you know today. Thank you.
Hop on up. Get your coffee. You got to fill up your coffee. All right. Yeah, for those, I'll go through and have each of the guys introduce themselves. As you know, about me, I'm Joe Way, so I am the director, as you know, I'll just repeat, Director of Learning Environments at USC. Oh, here we go. So I oversee the design, installation, and support for about 500 AV-enabled classrooms across the enterprise, as well as I serve as the chair of the Higher Education Technology Management Alliance, HETMA, which serves as I call it the business wing of our AV industry, supporting and advocating for the needs of us within the greater AV industry, and of course, host the Higher Ed AV podcast. So it's a pleasure to be back. I love everyone keeps saying, well, how did I come all the way out here from Los Angeles? And it's because to be with our people. So that's why I really wanted to be able to give an opportunity to come here and have this conversation, because we know, as I say, we know that integrators are a necessary evil. We have to deal with them, and we're forced to. No, but actually, it's the partnerships and relationships that kind of matter. And this is why we can't be successful with strong relationships with our manufacturers, with our integrator partners, and we live as higher ed in a very unique position opposed to the rest of the industry, in the sense that, we're end users, but yet we're not end users because we have our own user, right? We're integrators, yet we're not integrators. And we are consultants, and yet we're not consultants. So we sit in this strange place. Well, it's really important then that we can build those relationships up. So why I'm glad to be here. So Griggs, you want to say a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Griggs Nichols. I'm with Alpha Video. Some of you guys may know me from previously another AV vendor in town. I've been in the AV industry about 14, 15 years, and prior to that, I was an IT analyst with a large financial management company. We had a global presence. And so I came from your side of the world as a customer and eventually worked into this side of the business. So I've kind of been on both sides. I've ran the help desk for quite a few years at the previous vendor I was at, and I joined Alpha about 1.5 years ago. So that's kind of a quick run on myself.
Nick Buller. I'm with Bluum Technologies, formerly Tierney and Trox Tierney. I've been in the industry probably about 10 years, 11 years now. I started out actually at University of St. Thomas. I was a student worker there, and then working under Nate and Ted, if you guys know those people. And then transitioned into kind of the corporate world for AV, and now back helping you guys out. I'm a systems engineer, so I do design, drawings, learn products, any kind of jack of all trades type of stuff. So.
Yeah, Shane King, EPA Audio Visuals. So I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing, and I'm actually just pleased to be here because it's last I remember, I guess it was Winona, 2018. Last time we were able to really do this. So I think it's great that obviously we're out here. I'm happy to see a lot of clients that we work with, and anybody that knows EPA. We actually celebrated our 45th year last year. Obviously, real strong focus in higher ed and a lot of corporate. And honestly, higher ed is really where a lot of the work has been lately. So it's great to be together here, have these conversations about obviously how our worlds have changed. So I'm looking forward to this.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and that last one in Winona, man, that keynote speaker was just fantastic.
Absolutely.
My God, really, this conference knows how to pick them. And all right, so let's start. What we want to do, we're going to kind of just go through a narrative here. I'm gonna, is obviously, did you notice we've gone through a little bit of a change in technology the last couple of years? The things we were talking about in 2019 are almost useless today, right? We're not having those same conversations. We've all Zoomified everything. So let's start with the trends you're seeing, and I'll actually stay with you, Shane, on this. What are those trends you're seeing now as we kind of look past the pandemic? We all, had think whatever we were worrying about ahead of time. We all started going on Zoom. Now, what are you seeing people doing on their campuses moving forward?
Sure. Yeah, great question. I think the fact is, that we very quickly, virtually overnight, had to make a quick transition into really adopting and almost standardizing around web conferencing platforms, right? I think for the most part, we don't see a lot of, the days of, like a hard codec-based system, a Poly, a Cisco, formerly Tamberg, that sort of stuff, where you had to dedicated room-to-room connectivity for video conferencing. Now, we have so many different options in web conferencing, and I think that is kind of here to stay, I would say. So I think the prospect of building out rooms now where they absolutely have to be adopted or figure out ways that, hey, how do we work with these technologies? Because it's important that we need to leverage the ability to do distance learning and hybrid learning, and how that can change seemingly on a week-to-week basis, right? So how do we bring students, faculty, staff, work with classrooms, and provide an environment, obviously, that that ultimately upholds what's important to the university and its students. And the technology, I think, that's going into these spaces it's complex, yet it has to be easy to use. So I think more and more, what we're being tasked with from the integrator standpoint is coming up with solutions, of course, that meet all these needs, but are flexible enough that, hey, we can change that, in a year. Or if we want to move from a Zoom to a Teams to, pick your flavor of the week for web conferencing, how do we make that work? And now what happens when, maybe I'm not utilizing a particular PC where we want people then instead to do a BYOD or a bring your own kind of, meeting device in there. How do we adapt to all that? How do we make that work? Those are all kind of the ongoing conversations, and it is changing. Just like you said, Joe. I mean, it's one of those things where the solutions that I've seen come out here, over the last couple of years, it's been wildly innovative by manufacturers, because they've been forced to come out with new solutions to be able to, continue, a critical piece of learning, teaching and learning for universities. So yeah, I think a lot of what we're putting in, or we're really designing, are just systems that are ultimately future upgradable, flexible, ability to change things without completely gutting infrastructure, and being able to leverage what's there. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. The key word I think there is the flexible, right? And maybe we don't really know we're all kind of coming back. We're kind of get the feelers. Some classes are still having to go online. Some aren't. Nick, what are you kind of seeing the same thing? What conversations are you having with customers for that post-pandemic?
Yeah, and a lot of the stuff that we are seeing as well, a lot of flexibility, a lot of high flex rooms for instructors, and even like conference room spaces for faculty. In addition to the Zooms and the Teams and the Google Meets and all that stuff coming down the line, who don't even know exactly what they want to do with features, because Zoom and Teams have changed so much over the last 2 years to meet the needs of multiple different industries. As those things progress, as those things kind of advance, having systems, a lot of USB capabilities, a lot of bring your own device capabilities kind of came up. A lot of that stuff kind of just jumped out of nowhere almost. Up until probably early January, USB was an idea, and some people were having it, but come March, April 2020, boom, everyone needs USB. And even within that, as we were talking about things like flexibility, connectors, right? USB-C has become very prominent. We used to be doing a lot of HDMI. Mac used to have mini DisplayPort / Thunderbolt, and now we've got Lightning and USB 3 or USB-C, and trying to figure out how all that stuff functions in our current environment so that we can update current environments to the new standard. Wow. Trying to figure out what the new standard is. I mean, that's one of the big challenges there is no one has one universal standard for what's going on, So.
I'm going to jump in here and say I think one of the big things, obviously, is supporting multiple platforms. We have everybody carrying around different devices, whether they're Android or Apple or other Windows flavors, or even in some cases might be a Linux platform. And being able to support those, and whether that's through a wireless device now, so we're doing a lot of wireless, bring your own device and trying to connect wirelessly, whether it's over different wireless platforms using buttons or not, because I think everybody seems to be going both ways now. So you want a button, you can have a button. Nope, you don't want a button, you don't have to have a button. So, but it's to provide that flexibility, and yet we still need to connect or be able to connect things with a wire, because sometimes wireless doesn't work. So,
and to stay with that, so are you having schools say, I need this type of flexibility, I need to account for everything, or are they standardizing on a platform and making the faculty adjust to what they've chosen? I mean, is it across the board? I mean, are we settled yet? I mean, what are it? And I'll stick with you on that.
I don't think we're settled. I think everyone's kind of heading out in different paths, and I don't know. There's the cat's out of the bag on that one. So everybody's heading and they're carrying a different device. I think the ability is try to have stuff that can support all the platforms.
And you said Linux. Who does Linux?
So.
All right, no. That'd be kind of cool, though. I mean, like, you want to be the one random campus, don't you? I mean, let's just be honest. No,
I don't think it's necessarily the campus, but you also have spaces where students are sitting down in a huddle space or something, and so you don't know what someone's going to be carrying in, at this point. So that's why I throw that out there. It's like it isn't necessarily a campus standard, but you have people wandering around using particular huddle spaces, or need to. We're seeing a lot of small huddle rooms or huddle spaces that are shared sometimes between faculty and students as a place to study or something, so they can use a small display or do a Zoom call and meet with other classmates that aren't there.
Yeah. Well, and I think, and I joke about it, but I think, and this is something for you all to think about as we get to question and answer time, is it's not just different types of use, but it's different disciplines and the needs of each of those disciplines, right? And Nick, can you kind of speak to that, or are you seeing that, and how are people adapting our spaces in order to account for that stuff?
Yeah, so depending upon, let's just say on an average college campus, you have how many different, different disciplines, different majors, different, what does the faculty need versus the student? Document cameras is a big, question. Do you need a document camera in the room? Do people still use that? Do people use overhead projectors still? Because we have, requests for overhead projectors and legacy technology. I know there's a couple of clients who only have like this one, laser disc DVD that has like a lesson for the specific thing in biology, and it's been that way for decades. So how are you able to integrate that into like a standardized package, right? So when you're coming to a client and you're trying to help them simplify their system, so that as we're all working on these things, we have to think about not only student use, faculty use, but how do we maintain these things as well? How are we helping, our staff be able to get into the room quickly if something, the power cable gets tripped over or something like that? You don't have to switch or hit 50 buttons to get the system back and running. So a lot of that comes down to trying to figure out what standardized technology, or as much standardized technology as possible, is on campus. And trying to figure out, different allotments of scenarios. So,
yeah. So, all right. So we kind of see we have to be flexible. We're trying to still work our way through this. But now let's get to the elephant in the room. If I even wanted to do a classroom, and my rep says you got 22 weeks until I can get your NVX unit on your campus. All right. So Shane, what are we doing? I mean, summer is just vacation. Time. I'm not throwing snowballs in the summer. I know that, but
good around here, but
yeah. I mean, I can't wait. You want to do a snowball fight later? I'm on for it. But okay, so how are we dealing with the supply chain? What does it mean to everyone here? Because we still have to deliver for our customers, even if our manufacturers can't deliver to us. How are we handling that?
Yeah, I mean, there's not an easy answer for that, unfortunately. I think we're all up against this right now, and whether, we're in the lens of, teaching and learning, or integration, or manufacturing. I mean, we're unfortunately all in this together right now and trying to kind of work through this. And I know I've talked to plenty of people in the room, like, what do we do? You know, I've had orders in for some time now, and there's no guarantee I'm going to get something for this summer, right? And I think over the years and years that we've all been doing this, that yeah, there is a certain expectation that we need to set in terms of how these environments need to work, need to operate, need to be supported and troubleshooted and so on and so forth. And you know, when we find the right standard that really works, whatever that equipment is, whatever that solution is, we need to stick with that because we know it works. We know it's repeatable, it's scalable. But now we get flipped on our head because I can't get my NV Xbox, I can't get, you know, my video switcher, you know, control processor, whatever the case may be. So I wish I had a good answer for that, but I really don't. It's a hard situation to work through. And so the conversations come up, you know, between a manufacturer and an integrator. Hey, can we look at building a different solution? Can we design it differently? Well, maybe, right? But then, you know, that's a conversation between the university, the integrator, the university, the integrator, and the manufacturer. Like, if we radically change a design, what does that do? You know, how do we support a new system? Although the end result is the same, what are the things that we need to consider on the back end? What are the other types of equipment that we need to be familiar with? And what happens if a piece of equipment fails? How do we need to support that versus maybe established rooms?
I think that key word again is flexibility. Is now we not only have to be flexible in what we're asking or what we're trying to support the users, but we also need to be flexible on the backside. And we're oftentimes seeing, some of you guys when we were talking earlier, we're told 22 weeks, but then all of a sudden it shows up in 4 weeks. And now we have to try to, you know, not on the integrator side, now we're trying to scramble because we know you want the rooms up and running. Now we've already dedicated resources out to meet that 22 weeks, and all of a sudden we're having to shuffle around. Everyone's got to be flexible, and I think that's one of the big things we're discovering is just figuring out a way to be flexible. Maybe there's a way that we can get a room up and running partially and get you through until the rest of the pieces. We've had to shuffle around with a number of clients just trying to figure out how we can give you basic functionality, and then we'll come back as the other pieces come in and we'll give you full functionality. And that's, you know, sometimes that can't be done, obviously, if you're relying on a control processor or something. That's
Well, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, again, modularized system. So something where, you know, the video system is separate from the USB functionality versus recording versus audio. Maybe, you know, maybe now the mixer's not coming in this week or next week or in 2 months, but you can get the video system up and running so presentations can happen, you know. So modularize the system a little bit more is what we've had to do quite often.
Yeah, I was going to add to that too, that I think by doing it that way, yes, I mean, we can kind of figure out what are the critical pieces and parts to, you know, keep a room running. And, you know, are there pieces of equipment in there that can continue to be utilized? Maybe it's, you know, getting right at or a little past where we want to decommission stuff. But yes, I know I've talked to a few people that, yeah, we need to figure out ways where we can maybe extend the life out of some of this equipment for at least a little while. Maybe we can update the video equipment, but maybe the control that's there needs to stay. So I think flexibility kind of nails it. It's just trying to work with what's there and integrate what you can based on what's available. And, you know, unfortunately for everybody, it sometimes requires us all to have to touch rooms multiple times, you know, and so that's a big impact there.
Yeah, see, and that's where I was going to go. During our kind of pre-call, you know, I told a story that, you know, a couple weeks ago, we've got an esports room I have to finish. I'm 12 NVX short of it. And I get a call from my rep, and he goes, hey, you want to go play golf? You know, on Monday, oh, sure, let's go play golf. I got a gift for you. He pulls up next to me, goes, pop your trunk. And I got 12 NVX units he's throwing in the back of my trunk. And I'm like, because it was what happened, the story was they had another project, but because the timelines couldn't line up because they had such and this from one manufacturer, they're waiting for this, for that. Well, they're not just going to sit on this equipment. They got to get it out somewhere, right? So how are you guys handling, and I'll throw this to any of you, how are you handling that when we got a project? I want to build this well, maybe I'm so many weeks on the control processor, I'm so many weeks on this, but my projector is going to come in. How do you balance that and then make the project line up when, and I still got to get my own facilities people in here running cable? Like, how can we manage those timelines when there's so many unexpecteds?
Flexibility.
We have the title for today's panel.
I constantly see our project managers just juggling. It's a juggling act, and it's constant. It's really communication and trust, and everybody needs to always be talking, probably more so than you used to, about where things are at, when they're coming in. And as we mentioned earlier, sometimes things were told 22 weeks, and all of a sudden it shows up in 4 weeks. We didn't know, it just showed up. And all of a sudden we're trying to scramble to try to figure out how do we fill that hole. Luckily, everybody else is in the same boat. So meanwhile, I may have guys sitting around because we're waiting on another project that didn't get their thing in 4 weeks, but it will be 22. So
yeah. And so with that, and I'm curious that this could probably be an hour just in itself. Do we change our standard to get a room going? Or do you just tell your users and administration, sorry, you're out of luck for a year? Because there's two different things, right? Sure, we talk about as a, and see if y'all agree with me. We always say, as long as the touch panel's the same and the user doesn't know the difference, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Okay, it does. Because I don't want to have to support two different types of rooms as well, right? That adds to my costs and my training with my staff and where we're trying to troubleshoot. So with that, the long question is this a time that we maybe should think? I mean, there are other manufacturers out there. If you're doing AV over IP, there's not really just NVX and NAV, right? There are a lot of other good solutions out there. Is this the time we have to play with some of that? If I don't know. I mean, and one, are you seeing it? Is it a yes or no? I will make that very open-ended, and you can take it how you want.
Yeah, I would say there is now more than ever. I would say it's good to look into functionality versus manufacturer. Right? What is the functionality that is provided? Manufacturers that you are comfortable with are fantastic, and sometimes it requires branching out and learning some new stuff, which is difficult on all of us, from the salesperson on all the way down to the end user. Right? It's this new equipment. Maintenance gets a little bit more expensive, and there's a little bit more training. But at the same time, it's some projects can't wait. Some are a little bit more flexible, right? And other things like during the middle of the project or during the installation phase, rolling schedules have been a big thing where, we have equipment for 10 rooms this week and we can do these 10 rooms. We've got more equipment coming in, in the next 2 weeks, and just making sure that you're working with everyone involved in the project to get that schedule aligned in a way that makes sense, especially for as much equipment's coming in as we usually handle, so.
I think kind of the other thing to think of is, as we have a lot of different manufacturers, we now have quite a few standards that are we don't have to stick with one thing. If we have Dante, we can kind of support that across a lot of different manufacturers. So we may just have to change out a wall plate or change out a DSP, but we're still going to use Dante across the board. Or we're going to use AES 67, or we're going to use HD base T. So we can stick with some standards and still be able to provide potentially different manufacturers, which may not be ideal, but we can still get those things, those services from the back of the room, from the rack to the front of the room.
That's the other title, is it may not be ideal.
Yeah. The great thing about standards, too, is so many to choose from. All right, so quick poll. Do a quick poll of the audience, only for the tech managers here. Choice A, I tell my administration we got to wait, we're going to stick with our standard. Or choice B, I'm willing to test new technologies that I wouldn't be my standard because I got to get a building. So who's telling your administration we're waiting it out? Yeah? All right, and how many are willing to say I'll test some new things just to get up and going? Yeah, so, I mean, it was more where you're going to wait it out, right? I mean, there was some willing to test. But it looked like we were at about 2/3 to 3/4 said, I'm going to wait it out, right? So you're integrators. You still got bills to pay, but we're all waiting it out. What do we do now? Like, is this a time where, and I'll tell you what I'm doing, is maybe I'm looking at different things. Maybe I'm looking at managed services. Like, I'm telling my team what we're going to do this summer is, one, we're going to enjoy vacations because y'all deserve it after this hell of a 2 years. 2, we're going to start sitting there as, how can we improve our support services, right? Integrators are now starting to sell support services and managed services. Are you seeing movement? I know we're seeing movement in the AV industry as a whole. Are you seeing it in higher ed? Is it something we should be thinking about if it's not just throwing in, equipment in? Shane?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the managed services angle is something that has been pretty nebulous in this industry for a long time. And to your point, Joe, I feel like a lot of that was more maybe on the corporate side of the house, when we're dealing with building infrastructure and then obviously solutions like in conference rooms and things like that. But yeah, we can't overlook the fact that essentially classrooms and lecture halls and things like that, same thing. I mean, it's technology that needs to be serviced over time. Obviously, everybody is kind of on different timetables based on budgets and things like that. So, can we get 3 years out of this equipment, 5 years out of this equipment, 7 to 10? Those are things to think about. And I think that, as the equipment gets older, it's critical that it needs to be looked upon and made sure that it is up and running, because there's always you get to the critical mass on this stuff where it gets to a certain point, hey, we're having some issues, or God forbid, we still have some analog-based systems that are out there that need to be replaced or updated. And maybe I limp along, I try to replace a piece or a part, but then something else goes down because of the age of this equipment. And so I think a lot of this is what I feel to be kind of a partnership between, say the university, the college, and the integrator, because you guys obviously have your teams on the ground that are constantly having to service and troubleshoot this. At what point do you lean on the integrator to help with this as well? Can we take some of this off your plate so you can focus on other tasks? But yeah, it's a big piece. It certainly is. And I would say now more than ever, especially when you have so many other different pieces and parts that go into these rooms now, and having to deal with maybe the web conferencing end or digital signage or some of these different solutions that are becoming integrated within room services or technology. What part can the integrator help with? What part does the university need to focus on? And so, I think those are conversations that continue to evolve and become very, very important. So.
Yeah, Nick, are you seeing any move toward support services or things like that? It's kind of the same question to you.
I would say I have a little bit different perspective on it, just from the standpoint of companies I've been with have always provided support services, and that's always been something that's been an offering. So it's always been, if there are classrooms that were coming in, and you need help figuring out how to keep these rooms functioning. I've been with groups that have always provided at least something that, we can take over that classroom and help you, fix this, whatever's wrong, do PMs, stuff like that. In addition to, as we're seeing the movement towards, I would say in my time in AV, when I first started in AV, I would talk primarily with the facilities managers. And now I start talking more and more with IT personnel. We're bringing in more IT technology people and more networking and more all that stuff. So as we're seeing more movement to that, I'm also seeing the abilities and capabilities for manufacturers to integrate those things to, let's say, a network-based service or a cloud-based service. And some of those manufacturers have had that all along, on-prem systems, Extron Global Viewer, Crestron Room View, stuff like that. But some of the newer functionality allows integrators to support the systems from a distance, right? We've got remote systems that we can look at things for firmware updates, for program loads that, take less time for us to do things, and therefore it's less cost to the client in the end. So, I would say support services are becoming more prominent, but I don't necessarily know if it's something that's really all that new. It's just becoming more online, honestly.
Yeah, Griggs, kind of the same idea. There was a good point there. We're talking about cloud. We're talking about dealing with IT now over facilities people. Kind of legacy days either are on their way out or they're over. I guess it depends on where you are. We're dealing with, Zoom's a cloud, right, application that we have to support, and it's out there somewhere, right? Network cable goes in the wall, and then something happens, and it comes back to you, right? That's how it works. Are those things we have to start worrying about? Dealing with our IT? Are you, how are we handling that?
It's kind of interesting on a couple of points. As we start to deal with IT more, and oftentimes the AV folks are working either under or directly with the IT. IT's been using services for supporting switches and routers for a long time. We all know about Cisco, and we all know about their service contracts. So, and so everyone's kind of used to that and paying for those. And so I think we're starting to see kind of coming back to AV of at least the supporting the idea of looking at a service contract and in something that traditionally the service contracts were usually the corporations wanted to buy those and use them and support their equipment for 3 or 5 years. It's interesting in my kind of prep for this, discussions I've had with some manufacturers is seeing changing sort of the course of how how customers are in higher ed are paying for things, and instead of necessarily doing capital expenses out, that they're actually leasing, and that they're now on a planned roll. Like, we only expect our projectors to be 3 years, and we're just going to be on a leasing program, kind of like you might be with a car, and you're looking at it as a fixed expense. And at the end of 3 years, we're going to get rid of the old projector and put in a new one. So we're on a constant recycling, and we just have a fixed expense. I think some of that kind of helps with the support, because now you're no longer supporting a 7-year-old projector and trying to get a lamp that you can't get anymore.
Yeah, well, so. And it's interesting because there is a move there to move to a more OpEx versus CapEx. I'm a big proponent of it, but it's not our industry yet, right? It's definitely not higher ed. We are very capital-based. We are very straight budget-based, right? How can you, and I'll just throw it out to anybody, how do people start having these conversations? And maybe, like, now that we've all had to go to Zoom, people understand, oh, there's a Zoom license, it has to keep being repaid for. Is this a time to make that move? How can we have those conversations when you got traditional schools that are, here's your budget, here's your capital, we're doing this one building, and,
Well, we had in our kind of pre-call discussion about this is that, especially with the difficulty of getting components to get the equipment to us and to you guys, to the end users, is looking at how we have these discussions within our own environments, our own accounting groups that want us to spend a certain dollar amount by X date. That equipment needs to be installed and on site and paid for. And we're having to be flexible and trying to figure out. And sometimes the accounting guys don't like being flexible. They're very ones and zero oriented, and this is the way it's got to be. We kind of opened up on some ideas on how some groups are not able to be flexible, and it's going to require some real changes in how things are paid for. And now we start sliding things further out. Or I think in your case, you had mentioned that you guys have an entirely kind of different way of doing it, and once the money's allocated, it moves somewhere else, and then I'm free to spend it whenever.
Yeah, and that was. And I think it's something we do have to think about. And Shane, I'm gonna go to you in a sec. But that's how we work. Is we've moved off the traditional budget cycle, and once something's approved, it goes into my own account, and I spend it however I want to spend it, when I want to spend it, which is very important, I think, now as we look to, almost going full circle to supply chain. We can't pay for stuff. Traditionally, you can't pay for it till it arrives on-prem. Well, if it was budgeted in the last budget cycle, are you going to lose that money, or how can you kick the can down the road? Most schools don't don't want to keep that rolling. I don't have that problem because it just sits in another account until I need it. But how can kind of continuing with that?
Yeah, I think, to the last topic, I think if we're looking at, say, capital expense compared to operation expense, and if everybody is familiar with capital budget, hey, I've got a certain amount for AV, for a building, for certain rooms. Yeah, at what point does it make sense? Do we need to consider a different way to do that? I think what it comes down to is just building value, right? So if it's a wildly different process or procedure than maybe what a university is used to, if there's something that maybe, at least from the integrator standpoint, we can help build value in a different process, a different product, a different solution. Like, hey, I can get you a lot more for your money, or, maybe if you do stretch it out over a period of time, or if we look at integrating it differently, right? Maybe we prioritize certain rooms over others. A lot of different ways to look at that. But, I think aside from that, to your last point here, Joe, yes, what can be done in terms of, looking at creative ways to obviously, maybe handle billing, or, handle procurement of product, knowing that, hey, we're a certain lead time out on certain critical pieces. Can we shift that money around a little bit? Because we know within, with probably a pretty good number within the next year or two, we're going to need a certain number of projectors. We're going to need, a certain number of other pieces and parts that need to go in the rooms. And, let's be honest, it's a tough situation. It's a challenge for everybody right now, but not everything is as bad off as, say, a processor or a video switcher. I would say, at least at this moment, next week could be a different scenario, but a lot of flat panel monitors are in pretty good shape. Again, I think everybody has needs for certain things like that. So hate to say, keep throwing it out there, but the flexibility is key where, hey, we know we have some money, we have to spend it by a certain date. What are other things that we can potentially allocate that to or purpose that towards, just to make sure that, hey, we don't lose it? Do we have to become kind of creative on how we can maybe do some of the billing here, and maybe that is looking at potentially a service contract or just other things that could be radically different than the way that we've ever looked at it, but it's just because of the situation that we're in right now. I think, again, the flexibility is tremendously important, but I think that's where a good partnership between, say, a university and an integrator and a manufacturer comes into play. So we can kind of talk through this stuff, because it shouldn't be us calling the shots saying, well, why don't you do it this way? Why don't you do it that way? No, let's have a conversation. What is the most important? Can we prioritize this? What are the things that we feel like we can do? Because that's where we want to become a value or continue to be a value or a trusted partner here, is that we can go and have these conversations with manufacturers, with multiple manufacturers, take that off the plate of the university, and we'll figure these things out. We will help work through what can we get, what can't we get, what are maybe some creative ways that we can go about doing this, and we present those options so then you can make an educated decision there and hopefully utilize the funds that are there, because I think, Joe, you're in a very unique situation in being able to allocate money and then you have it, whether it happens a year or 2 years down the road. And I feel like most universities, most clients that we work with are not that way. So we have to figure out ways that we can utilize that funding, and just making sure that it's still of a value and that we're providing us a service or solution that makes sense, not just for the sake of using the money. So.
Word of the day, flexibility.
Yeah. Well, so also back to a show of hands. So for most of it, you'll lose your money on June 30, right? You use it or lose it. How many are actually having conversations about extending that because of supply chain and being able to ask? Have you had the conversations with your procurement departments to say, yeah? And I think that's one of those things is we got to start doing that, because, I mean, I don't know if your administration is like mine. They don't like when you come back and ask twice, right? They would rather ask once and be honest and be open with them. Here's the situation. Everyone knows there's a supply chain issue. I mean, like, this is not a big surprise in the world right now. So I think it's one of those having the conversation, because the last thing I want to do is come back later and go, yes, I would like to propose this project. Like, wait, didn't I already approve that project, or didn't we already pay for that? Or well, then what did the money go to? Which is another thing, is maybe we can get displays, maybe we can't get that. Are you going to have the conversations of, wait, I gave you money for X, you're asking for it again, what did you spend the money on, right? Those are things that we're going to have to start having conversations. I think that our administrations, because this is a global issue and not an AV issue, they're probably more likely to be okay with. But we have to be honest with it, right? And have those conversations.
We're not the only group that's suffering these things through it. So it's across the campus, whether they're building a new building and they can't get a garage door, because that takes 22 weeks. It's something that's common across all disciplines. Everybody's having delays on items. So I think at least now seems like the most logical time to open up that discussion and potentially make a change across the board as to how things may be done. I know that's a tall call. Having worked with money guys, changing accounting things is not an easy ship to turn around.
No, it's definitely not, but it's one of those things that maybe has been needed, and maybe this is the opportunity to do that. So I'm going to switch gears and go kind of, since I have 3 wonderful, great integrator partners, let's pretend nobody else is here. We're not recording. There's no camera. It's just us. give us what's the stuff we need to know? Like you have your conversations to how annoying we are as customers, right? They're not here.
No, we don't do that.
No. You're back in the office, conference room, and oh man, were they annoying? And you get so what are the things that we should know to help improve our relationships with you all? It's just us. There's no one else here. Go for it, Nick. He said you can say it. You can say it. Open the can of worms. Let's go for it.
Scheduling.
Yeah.
Needs to
More.
be a constant communication between us, our project managers, our clients, and the users. I think one of the bigger pain points, especially right now, it's during the school year, is if we're doing a project during the school year, how do we maintain or make sure that classrooms are available without, making it so that an instructor can't teach for the day, right? And if we're integrating equipment that allows them to, do remote learning, but they don't have the capability fully yet, just making sure that we as integrators can be a little bit flexible with things that are coming down the line, maybe rooms switch up at the last minute that are available or something like that. And or just making sure that the users and the end users know ahead of time what's going to be happening, rather than the week before or something like that. So,
yeah, no, I think that's huge. Yeah, Shane?
Yeah, I was going to comment on that absolutely, I think scheduling is something that has almost flipped on its head now to where, we have to be very reactive with that. I can say, at least from EPA standpoint, historically, yeah, I mean, it's, we could be anywhere usually from 30 to 60 days out on actually, getting a project completed. And this was back in the glory days where I could put in an order for anything and I would have it within 2 weeks, right? Or 3 days, for instance. So at that point, the real holdup on my end is my resources, my installation team, my programmers, and so on and so forth. It's the other way around now. Now I have, folks that obviously we're trying to keep busy, whatever the case might be, whether it's, working through stuff at the shop or obviously working directly with end users. Hey, are there things that we can help you guys out with? Take off your plate, because I have some resources available this week. And unfortunately, if I can't put them to work, after a certain period of time, those are hard conversations, and everybody's had to go through that right now, whether we're dealing with layoffs and things like that. So yeah, I think the flexibility in scheduling is very, very important to where, hey, if, when we get back to talking about product again, those 12 NVX boxes that miraculously showed up for you, did those get, yanked from another project because, hey, their timeline was pushed out further? That's a healthy conversation to have with people. Hey, if we don't believe we can get work done because we're held up on a garage door or other pieces and parts that go into the construction process, I think having an honest conversation, again, with everybody here to say, yeah, no, we're not on a timeline. Like, this isn't mission critical for me right now. Even though you can get this equipment, I probably don't need this installed for a few months. Well, can we talk through maybe the capability of shifting some of that product to somebody else? Because maybe they do have a very, very important project. And again, it's the flexibility in when that's, those projects can happen, not just based on when resources are available, but when the projects need to happen because of how important they are to the campus of the university. So,
yeah. Griggs?
I think that goes the other way as well. I think especially if we're dealing with any new construction, especially as AV integrators, the one thing we always kind of joke about is we're the last guys in the room. And unfortunately, everyone seems to still have their eye on a specific opening day or starting day. And the guys who get pushed to the end, we're the last ones in. All of a sudden, that 2 weeks we needed in the room, can you guys get that done in 2 days? We still want to get that opening on a specific date. And I think that's kind of the back joke that we all sort of deal with is we're the last guys in the room, and yet you still want it on the same date. And everybody else got to slide because they did. They couldn't get the garage door. They couldn't get the door closers. They couldn't get the latches or the hinges. But we still have to try to get everything in and installed in 2 days. And I think that comes back to the communication and the expectation. And I think that still goes even beyond where we're at today with the pandemic and coming off of that and the shortages. It's a constant thing in AV, and you guys probably all feel the same thing on your end too. As things get pushed, everybody still wants that opening date and flexibility.
School starts when school starts. hold your thought. I'm going to come back to you. I think we have a traveling mic. We're going to go ahead and start moving to question and answer too. Questions for you all that you can grill them right now. It's just us. There's nobody there. So get your questions ready, starting right after Shane's next comment.
Yeah, I think what I was going to add to that was kind of thinking through the process in which, that maybe we ask for, allocate, sequester money and things like that. I think if everybody is pretty straight on, hey, what are the pieces and parts that we need for rooms, for the build out. This kind of came up in our planning call, like in some cases, and this will give a lot of people a little bit of anxiety, but the individuals in the room that are obviously utilizing the technology in most cases are really only concerned with, hey, does this work? Is it consistent with what I get room to room? So we don't necessarily care. They won't care what's on the back end of that, what's in the head end, Is it this Tron or that Tron or you name it, right? That may not matter to them as much as long as the end result and their experience is the same. So yeah, there are other pieces and parts that we can kind of try to put in place that we know are going to provide the same experience or at least give the same functionality, but yet it's not going to change anything for the end user. I think those are important considerations. And again, having these discussions around maybe doing test out rooms and labs and things like that, and whether the integrator helps with that, the university takes it on, or a combination of both, like, hey, let's test through some things, let's try some different solutions, see if we can get to the same end result without major impact and without hopefully affecting the budgets too much. But what I'm getting at is I think the important piece to all of this is really we know the pieces and parts that we need. We've established these room standards for years now. Yeah, let's look at even just getting orders in, much quicker than maybe we ever did. I know there's been, some groups in here that, hey, we've cut orders much sooner than we ever have. We have work coming up this summer. Years past, I would be able to cut that order maybe in April, no problem. I'm going to have that equipment. That's not the case anymore. So now we start putting the order in, January, February, and even that might not make it for us. And I know there's plenty of you in here that have anxiety about that, but that's the case, and we're feeling the same way. So as an integrator, we're changing some of the ways that operationally we're doing our business, or we're taking more of a risk on pulling product in. I'm looking at my run rate of business over the certain quarter. I have a pretty good idea of the type of pieces and parts that we're going to be selling regularly. So we're going to try to take some of that on our end. We're going to maybe order some of that equipment up. Am I going to get it any quicker than you guys? Honestly, no. But at some point, hopefully, we're going to be in a better spot. So we're going to have some of that stuff so we can turn and burn some of these projects quicker. I don't know when that is, but these are operationally ways that, we're trying to change how we're doing business so that we can better support end users. So.
Yeah, there's a good point there, because I think something we don't think about as kind of in-house teams is you still have to pay your manufacturers, right? When it arrives in your warehouse, you're net 90 on paying them or whatever it is, right? And if you can't align that, right, that you're actually taking that financial risk that the rest is going to be coming through. It probably is a decent time. There's enough projects delayed that you can probably use it elsewhere, like how I got mine, my equipment. But that said, this is where I think you're right, going to the scheduling point. We have to be open to let you know, here is our time frame. Here's when we can make this happen. Here's when it has to happen. I mean, ribbon cutting day is ribbon cutting day, right? And now how can we start to help you, and or, what financial risk are you taking, right? Because I think what we had during our talk, you've got, I'm just making it up, a projector that's 4 weeks out, but a control system is 20 weeks. Well, you're trying to align that, so you're going to go, oh, well, I'm going to wait to put the projector order in. Well, we don't know that things aren't going to change, and by the time you get to when you think you can do it, now that's 20 weeks out, right? So you're having to now be creative in this way. You're the ones taking all the risk on that, right? And I think that that's important for us to think about, right, and understand, and where these conversations are important, and maybe that's where we got to get a storage closet and get it in so we can pay it out and know we have it.
Yeah, and it's one of those awkward conversations that you sometimes have to have is, I'm sorry, but here's what we can do, right? So that the projector's not in. And at that point in time, shifting focus from here's, 45 rooms to get done, here's how many weeks you have to do it, to what are the priorities? So shifting priorities to, are there specific rooms that need to be done first? Are there specific rooms that are more important that need to get done right away? The, president's office, president's conference room type of things. Is there a meeting space like this that needs to get done so that you can have larger classes? And being able to sit down and talk with the client and listen to the people is going to be a big part going forward. And I don't know, things are slowly starting to get a little bit better, but I don't see that, necessarily changing with everything happening in the world. So.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think that's a great takeaway for us. So, open it up to the audience. Anyone have any questions for these gents? Or technically me too, if you wanted. But by all means.
I'll be your mic runner.
All right. Enter awkward silence for first person to raise hand.
What did the farmer say when he lost his tractor? Where's my tractor?
Yeah. All right. So, questions, comments. You got them right here. This is your chance to grill. They won't take it personally, at least not very personally. All right, Rod in the back.
I'm going to come to Larry first, and then Rod.
This is just a quick survey. How many institutions out there are receiving CARE dollars for equipment?
This is to our group. Who's got CARE? We got two. We got only. Yeah, that's not very many. Same with us. We were as a university we received it, but we didn't get it. They went to other stuff. I think there's is an interesting top comment because there's optics involved too, right? What are you throwing that money toward? We chose to throw it toward student support and those who were basically disenfranchised by not having computer labs open, those types of things. So we went to spend it on other stuff, and not me. And I think a lot of schools might have been that same way.
So you talked about multiple touches to a room. So as we're trying to deal with the supply chain problems, and you're coming out and you're only able to get the room partially working, now you got to come back again. How's that impacting how you're bidding a project? How are you factoring those multiple trips back into our university as you bid out a project?
I'll say that because everything seems to be constantly changing, I've made the decision to at least start off in the quote process with no changes and kind of see where we land, and then we have to adjust things as we're going. But because if I'm chasing everything, what's available, what I heard was available today from one vendor, next week may not be available. And then all of a sudden the other thing I was going to use is available. So I've kind of decided to try to maintain my forward, what we've decided on as a vision for a particular space. And then as we go through into the ordering process, we may have to make some adjustments as we find out when things are going to be available. It's really hard because, like we said, we'll be told 22 weeks on something and it will show up in 4 weeks. And something that we were told was available in 2 weeks is now 22 weeks. And these things are constantly changing based on everybody else's priorities. And we'll have someone else in the world buying 22 NVX units, but then all of a sudden they get delayed and all of a sudden they're available. Or you'll have people that will be in line and they've been told 22 weeks and they needed 100 items. Well, we can't wait 22 weeks. We're going to go and get something else from somewhere else. We're going to make a change. Now all of a sudden those become available and we've just moved up in the queue.
Yeah, no, and I think it's interesting are you having conversations now about like the priorities in a space, getting that infrastructure in, getting the things so that the room can be ready. I mean, the good thing is we're moving to network-based AV. I mean, pretty much all of us are. You're not doing a new room and not putting it. So by being able to make sure you got power and data, get those placed so that if the projector comes in early, we can mount that. It's not going to be able to go onto a screen yet, but at least it can go in and it's in space. Right?
You might be able to put it in racks. There's a lot of things that we can still kind of get that we generally don't see long lead times on The things that are generally hitting us are things that have network interfaces or USB or digital to analog or analog to digital converters. Those are the things that are sort of hitting us hard at the moment. So if we can work around that and maybe get some of the infrastructure pieces in, the cable, the racks, the nuts and bolts of a project, and then we can come back in and kind of finish it up and sew it up. And it may mean putting in a wall plate with a hardwire connection to a projector, if you can get the projector, or doing something, that gives you at least makes the room functional. Like I kind of go back to what I have to deal with running a service desk is there's days that the system doesn't work, but if we've designed it right, at least maybe we've got a way that the service tech can come in and give a hardwire connection to the boardroom table, so at least they can, if the switcher's out, they can still do their presentation. And I think that's we have the same thought process here: is how do I at least get this so it can be used?
Yeah, definitely some sort of redundancy, right? You were talking about wireless presentation earlier. Always have a hardwire backup for wireless, right? Type of thing. And within the bidding process, specifically to answer the question about the bidding process, contingency and communication, right? Put in, say, hey, we're going to allot this to potential issues. And if those issues arise, great. If not, here you go. Can I have it back type of thing? And just being upfront about that on the bid side. So there's not always a lot of opportunity to, my associates know that I like to write a lot. So when I do scopes of work and stuff, I've got, pages of stuff going on. And we don't always have the opportunity to do that. Sometimes on a bid, you have a line on a website that you can put that in. And just making sure to find some way of communicating to the end client that, this is what we're doing and this is why.
Yeah, I find communication to be probably the most important aspect of that, what you brought up there, Nick. I think the reality is, we can't control so many of these factors right now. And I think we can make some assumptions, as an integrator, and we always try to put our best foot forward when we're bidding or quoting or proposing something that, this is a project. We will get it done consecutively or, within a certain period of time. And, we are quoting and associating the labor appropriately. But it's important to stay in touch with everybody to say, hey, well, if we need to, let's talk through what are the critical pieces in these rooms. So is it the video or the audio, whatever the case might be? And, if that can be segmented, if we can get a portion of it done because I can get that equipment, that is an option, but this is what it's going to, here's the impact to us, right? And hopefully, if by having good, consistent communication up front, if it means that maybe there is some more money that needs to be come up with, that's a hard conversation sometimes, but that would be our ask from the integrator standpoint. Like, hey, we want to do everything we can, but we're exposed here, especially if it's contractual, where there's a certain, markup that we have to stick to based on a contract. U of M, Minnesota State, UW schools know all about this. Now I'm stuck, right? I like, this is getting difficult for the integrator, to be productive, to be efficient, while at least maintaining, the amount of obviously margin, and I'll just say that, unfortunately, that we need to do what we can there, so that we can maintain this level of business and continue providing the discounts that are available. But if we have to touch a room 3 times, and that starts going the other way, that gets difficult. And that's where, again, the communication is critical. And I think, having a good partnership, to kind of work through that is tremendously important. So.
Yeah, and I think that last point is good, especially as you're starting to budget out, and we have to realize where does the blame fall, and it probably falls everywhere and nowhere, right? Sometimes it's us, sometimes it's manufacturers, sometimes it's everywhere and nowhere. But I think what's important to realize is we all have the same goal. We all want to put our kids through college, right? We all need to make money. We all have to provide services. We all have to have customers who we need to support. Your customers just happen to be sitting here. Ours are currently on spring break somewhere much warmer than this. But the goal is the same, right? And I think that, again, having those conversations and maybe planning it out. I mean, I'm curious if have you given bids that kind of have an extra contingency in there? I mean, one thing that we always do whenever I take a bid or I get whatever the bid is, I always add 20% contingency, and it goes in the account because you never know, especially now. And I've had some projects where I'm actually hitting over that 20% just because of the rising costs, right? So those are things we got to start planning, and especially if extra labor costs come that might be my fault. If we're not ready on a space and it comes in and you've communicated with me, well, that's my expense, right? I owe it to you because you're sending a team out there for 8 hours, right? That's billable hours that we should be responsible for, So I think these are those types of things that we have to have the conversations, right? And we're all looking for long-term partnerships. We can all work well together, as we work through it. And I think that's going to be the key. That's good. That's really good. I think we have time for one or two more questions out there. So anyone else have anything? Yes.
Sure. So, hello.
Yeah.
You got it? Oh, okay. There we go. All right, I'm going to flip it up. You guys will appreciate this question. I'm going to put Joe and Grant on the spot. During this time, how flexible have the manufacturers been with you in providing approved equals or substitutes or different solutions to things that may not be in stock, or, would they accept this as an option instead of what you're trying to get, because that's like 4 or 5 months out?
Yeah, so you're asking how the manufacturers have been? Yeah, well, mine show up and throw stuff in my trunk. But y'all didn't hear that. No, actually, it's a great question. I remember I was at Infocom, and I'm sitting there on the couch with Dan from Crestron, and we were talking and saying, what's this look like? And he's sitting down with my team, and how are we planning for the future? And I when I ask the question to everyone, who's going to wait it out? I'm going to wait it out. I will not change my standard. But that was the whole thing. Are you willing to move from a NVX to maybe a DM? Because we've got similar, can you go back to Series 3? Are there things that you might want to do? They are being flexible because they also realize we've got to get up and running. What I haven't heard is, can we put something temporary and come back and change that? Now, that might change the conversation. I'm going to give you a DM now, and then we'll come back and NVX it later. But I'm not hearing that type of flexible. But they are being honest, and I think that's really the key, is just be honest with me so that I can make the decisions I need to make, right? And maybe that goes to us being a unique vertical, right? Because of not being true end users, right? You may, and right or wrong, but in the commercial side, if you've got a random business down the street that just wants 2 training rooms and 4 conference rooms, are you going to be as open as you would with us? Maybe, maybe not, because I can reach out to a manufacturer, right? And so I think that kind of is it. Just be honest. Let me know where it is. I've had these conversations with some of the manufacturers saying, hey, what I want to do for Hired AV and HETMA is give me what are your current lead times? Let us as people know what we're looking at. Problem is, we don't really know if that's, like was already said. Is it really going to happen? Next thing you know, a container ship pulls in and pop it open. Oh, look at that. Lots of chips right there. Changes everything. But I think they're being good. Hopefully everybody else has the same type of experience. They're being honest.
For the most part. I think they're being as honest as they can be. We've had some manufacturers that have turned back, and instead of giving us specific kind of ETA dates, they're now saying, we can't tell you exactly what date. We think it'll be in the month of June. So, and again, things show up randomly, and all of a sudden you're like, you told me June, and it's now April. Why? I know it's kind of. I had someone. I was talking with some folks a couple weeks ago, and someone said, a lot of these problems really come down to we're trying to make a cake, and we've got all the ingredients but the chocolate. So, are you okay with a not chocolate cake, or do you want to wait for the chocolate cake? So it's kind of what it comes down to.
Always wait for chocolate. Yeah, and we had a question up here. I think somewhere in the front, right? Yeah, 50% off your next project with any of these guys for everyone who asked a question.
I was curious about the idea of building value in a project, whether it's extending something that's already in place as a mix of new and old, or something that's going in that you think, yes, this is the cornerstone. if you have something you want to throw out there in a time of innovation, I'm curious if any of you have that either in a recent project or something where you're working with somebody and you're like, well, let's keep that part because I think that will keep the value for this room. I don't know if there's anything there or not. But.
Yeah, something recently that comes to mind is Extron processors. Extron had a lack of processors over the past year, and then they, because of the chipsets that they couldn't get from where they were trying to get their stuff, they switched to the new model line, right? So that would come in faster. During that point in time, we've had clients who have elected to use the previous iterations of the processors they have, which generally function the same as the next generation. They may just have less memory or RAM and aren't quite as fast, but for all intents and purposes, work relatively the same, right? So working with things like that. There are some pieces of equipment that you don't want to reuse. I'm sorry for anybody that still has a VHS player, but that is one of the more difficult components, just because interfaces being what they are nowadays, and video copyright problems with VHS tapes too. So the problem being they aren't copyrighted, and sometimes they have copyrighted content, and people get mad.
I would say actually one thing. I'm using this like. I love when I get excuses dropped on me in order to push technology forward. Like, I have milked this pandemic for everything I can get out of it. Because if we have an opportunity to move our technologies forward, the world has changed, right? It is fundamentally different and will not go back, nor should go back. So I think where you build value is now having conversations with your administration and going, what are we going to do as an institution? What's our identity moving forward? Are we going to say we're going to be a leader in hybrid learning or virtual learning, whatever? Are we looking at other technologies? I'm not doing anything this summer anyway. I can't get parts. So let's start planning 16 months down the road then, instead of 4 months down the road. What's going to be popular? What types of spaces are we doing? Well, we're starting to work on VR and AR rooms now. Is it popular now? No, but is it the next logical step from Zoom? Absolutely, right? So those are the types of things where I'm trying to build it and have conversations with my partners of, are you working on this stuff yet? Can we start working on this? Because maybe that's where I want to look, not this June, but next June, right? And then do some killer things then. All right. We're coming up. Last question. Anyone? Going once, going twice, and there we go. Mark.
So every manufacturer will say something a little bit different, and they'll put blame as to the delays on something different. Chip shortage. I mean, you name it. Is there any single manufacturer at this point that will say anything as to that they may get caught up in a year, 2 years? I mean, I hesitate to use the word normal, but when things will be able to ship in a more reasonable time frame so that those of us that are ordering gear can, be able to plan in a more, in less than, receiving product in less than 4 to 8 months.
Yeah, I'll take that one. I think to be perfectly honest, I haven't heard from any manufacturer that's been able to make any commitments, I would say, beyond probably a year. And some have even told me we're getting into maybe the 2-year time frame when they feel like it might start getting back to normal. And what is normal? I mean, is this normal now? Do we have to start planning a year ahead now for doing room builds and things like that? And then what happens when, well, that chipset manufacturer didn't come through, we got to switch over to this. Is it a different part number now? All these different things we have to deal with, and we have to do that as an industry now, unfortunately. And I think that the necessary evil of integrators is that we try to take the brunt of that from you guys as universities, that, hey, we'll try to fight those fights, and I pride myself on having as good a relationships with end users as I do with manufacturers. So I can call a manufacturer and have just a good, honest conversation. And I'll put them on the spot. At what point, hey, can I share that with the end user? Is this just, are we having a discussion over a beer, and is this something you're telling me in strict confidence? Or can I tell an end user what you're telling me right now? I don't want to break any sort of privileged conversations or trust, but that becomes important, because I think that's when we figure out, is this a legit what's being told to me right now, that I actually can share it with somebody? But that's a hard one. And I think, there's so much variability, and it's so fluid right now in the conversations that we're having, because whether something is claimed to ship, in 22 weeks and then it shows up in 4, it shows up in 26, we don't know that. And so again, we just, more than anything, to, Tony, to your question earlier, that most manufacturers have been as honest as they can, but sometimes they don't have all the information. So I think the most important piece is that it's just a consistent communication with them. And so as they hear something that changes, they let me know. And if it happens too often to where, the information is not accurate, it changes too much, I'm not being shared the information until it becomes a problem, I'm less likely to start working with that manufacturer as much. And that's where we start to see the ebbs and flows in R. Like, I get so much better support from C manufacturer compared to B manufacturer because of these things, because they're better at communicating, because they are hitting their dates, or they're at least telling me reasons why, so that I'm upfront enough that I can go have a conversation with the end user to say, we're going to have an issue here. What do we want to try to do? Versus 2 weeks after the product should show up, now we have to have a hard conversation, because sorry, it's not here yet, and I know we're supposed to install it next week. Now what do we do? So I think, again, those manufacturers that we can have those honest conversations with, share some of that information back with everybody else. That's what makes everybody as successful as we can be right now.
Yeah, no, I'll say too, I'll break privilege conversation. I'm hearing a good year to 18 months before the chips catch back up, and then you've still got a year cycle for those projects to catch up. Being honest, if you want to make smart decisions, you got to be looking 2 to 3 years down the road at this point, which maybe we should have always been doing anyway, but that's just realistically what we're looking at. And I've talked to some manufacturers that said, even if we're looking at a year, and I wanted to move to a different chip, or I wanted to change how to, what it would cost them and the time it would cost them in research and development to end up moving to a different option would probably have already caught up anyway, right? So, and then we would be paying the prices on it. So that's that. You were going to say one last thing, or no? I thought you had.
Oh, well,
you looked like you were doing the.
Well, hey, I kind of was going to jump in, but then, so we used to be, we had a big just-in-time manufacturing cycle, and I think one of the things that's going to happen, I'm not a prognosticator here, but I think things are going to probably rubber band back. The pendulum's going to swing where things are going to be just in time, but we're going to be a little bit longer out. We're not going to be looking at just trying to have stuff show up at the factory right when we need it. We are going to have to stock some stuff for a period of time so that we kind of be able to get caught up a little bit, at least from what I've been reading.
Yeah, no, and then just to answer, I know a lot of the main manufacturers are moving to a lot more. They're fast forwarding a lot of their software service R&D, because that you won't sit on a container ship. So those are other ways to focus. All right, I think this conversation is going to continue in a breakout. We got a couple other breakouts going on simultaneously. Round of applause for these gents right here. And you can thank them by sending them POs on Monday. All right. Thank you. Tuesday. Wait, is it Monday? It is Monday. All right. Tuesday.